Conversation. I'm Loretta Ryan from ABC Radio. It's lovely to have you here today, and we've got a live audience. Bit of noise, everybody. Clap your hands. We've got a lot of conversation happening today, and I'm sure you're really going to enjoy it, and just thank you so much for coming. And as I said, yes, it is being live streamed, so I'm glad you've all done your hair and everything. You look lovely. I would like to firstly acknowledge, though, the traditional owners of the land on which we gather today and pay respects to elders past, present and emerging of the Turrbal and Jagera people whose land we stand on today. Welcome again, everyone, here at the QSO and on live stream to Epic Sounds in Conversation. It's a discussion with William Barton and friends about his world premiere concert we're so excited about this weekend with the Queensland Symphony Orchestra. Also welcome and thank you to QSO supporters and to those watching at home, to the schools and also to the Brisbane City Council staff and BDO stakeholders and clients. First, before we get underway though, please welcome Tommy Coghill for the Welcome to Country.
Loretta, hello and welcome. My name is Bundamba Ya. I'm also known as Thomas of the Coghill family and Thomas of the Bonner family. Bundamba Ya in Yagara means battle axe belonging to Ya, and I'm a Yagara descendant through two main families or two main tribes. Firstly, on my father's side, I descend from grandfather Neville Bonner, who was the first Indigenous senator of Australia. He was a Jagera man, which is west of Ipswich, and he also was the lead rower when they went out to hunt turtle and dugong. On my mother's side, I descend from the Mortons, and our patriarchal ancestor that we can trace our lineage back is Grandfather Mookin. Grandfather Mookin was initiated a Yagara man, and he also was a message stick carrier. For those who don't know what a message stick carrier is someone who can travel into another one's country without seeking permission and not receiving a punishment. Also, Grandfather Mookin was in and around the 1880s, early 1930s. They changed his name to Charlie of Morton or Charlie Morton, and that's where the Mortons received their last name. Grandfather Mookin also was the first mayor of a place called Baramba. Baramba is commonly known today as Cherbourg, and it is a mission located northwest of Ipswich. Yagara country, it extends from the mouth of the Brisbane River, also known as Maiwa, and it goes all the way through. It's got two central meeting places or gathering points. On the north banks of the river, just where Botanical Gardens is located, it is called Meanjin. Meanjin means the spike of the spear or the tip of the spear. And the second central point for gathering is where the land we stand upon today is called Kurupaba, also known as South Bank. Kurupaba means the place of the water rat. You follow the Maiwa, the Brisbane River, all the way down to the foothills of Toowoomba and Warwick, back down south to as far as the Logan River that goes through Bow Desert and parts of Logan. Logan's traditional name is Birrumba, which means the dwelling place of the south. You follow the Logan River all the way out to the Moreton Bay, also known as Quandamooka or Dolphin Storm, and our furthest boundaries is the Caboolture River with Turrbal Undumbi connection. On the other side of those banks is another language-speaking nation, and that nation is Kabi Kabi. To the west, where the Great Dividing Range is the Waka Waka language-speaking nation. To the south is the Yugambeh language-speaking nation, and to the east is the Quandamooka Jandai language-speaking nation. So on behalf of the Yagara Turrbal people, I'd like to welcome you in the old tongue, Yiri Yira, Nambale Ganare Bajara Yagara, which means hello and welcome to Yagara country. I'd also like to play this instrument. It's called Didgeridoo, commonly known as Didgeridoo. To the Yagara people and surrounding clans, we call this instrument Brida Amandu, and what that means is to throw out sound from a hollow log. The Yagara people practice that this is strictly a men's instrument and a men's instrument only. Brida Amandu, or commonly known as Didgeridoo. Welcome.
Thank you, Tommy. Wonderful welcome to country. We appreciate you being here. Well, I better introduce the panel for our conversation. We've got a lot to get through this morning. Firstly, the man of the moment, William Barton. At 17, William thought he had realised a lifelong dream when he was invited to perform with the Queensland Symphony Orchestra. Now, this weekend, and just over 20 years later, this incredible Kalkadunga man, ARIA Award winner and distinguished artist of extraordinary musicality, will once again perform with the QSO, the world premiere of his new work, which we will talk to him a little bit about later on. These two concerts, yes, they happen this weekend, and we are so privileged that William is here today to chat to us about them. And as a note, the music that you heard in the foyer as you were coming in on arrival, that was William's Earth Cry. Please make William welcome. And he's been up bright and early this morning too, talking to us on radio. So thank you, William.
Happy birthday.
Oh, thank you. The Honourable Anthe Philippides, I'd like to introduce to you next. The first woman of Hellenic heritage to be admitted as a barrister in Queensland in 1984 and to attain silk in Australia in 1999. Anthe was appointed a judge of the Supreme Court of Queensland in December 2000 and a judge of the Court of Appeal in December 2014. A champion of equality and diversity and a leading light in our social justice story. Her Honour retired as a judge in April 2021. And William's world premiere for the Epic Sounds concert has been commissioned by Anthe, and we welcome you. Tony Denholder is a partner with the global law firm Ashurst and is widely recognised as one of Australia's leading native title lawyers. He is also the co-chair with Noel Pearson of Good to Great Schools, which supports schools to improve the education outcomes for Aboriginal children in remote areas. Only last Friday, Tony gave evidence to the Senate inquiry reviewing the protection of Aboriginal culture heritage in Australia. Tony is also a long-term director of the QSO. And of course, Craig Whitehead, one of Australia's most experienced arts leaders and the Chief Executive of Queensland Symphony Orchestra, having led Le Boite Opera WA and the Western Australian Symphony Orchestra, and as the brains behind some cutting-edge outreach programs nationally. We are looking forward to your thoughts today, Craig. Please make him welcome. Well, let's get started. We're going to start with you, William, I reckon. I want to go back a bit. Actually, before we do that, just watching the Welcome to Country there and listening to it, and I noticed you closed your eyes when Tommy was playing. Can you explain that to us?
I just wanted to feel the welcoming spirit from Brother Tommy and acknowledge his expression of the land and of his ancestors from this land. And so, I get to enjoy music or culture as well, when I'm not working. Yeah.
I'd like to go back a little bit too. When you were growing up in Mount Isa, when did you first start playing the didgeridoo or first pick it up?
Look, can't pinpoint the exact day and time, but certainly in my years between 7 and 10. And just what I remember was the mystical power of the sound that my uncle resonated and the other elders and the song and the chant, that raw elemental sound of the earth and how powerful it is, It was then and still is to this day. And I wanted to be a part of that mystery and I still am, which makes life really interesting because I get to, share that mystery or be a part of other mysteries of music. And when you experience life in a certain way, like from the landscape to going and touring the world to, major cities and, architectural buildings and that, you feed off of that inspiration. And, even down in Sydney when Mum and I go to Judith Nilsson's place called, White Rabbit and that, the architectural design in there. I really love the delay effects. And so you get the same effect out in the natural amphitheatres of the Australian bushland. We have our own wonderful backyard amphitheatres, from Carnegie Hall to the symphonies of the earth back home. It's really important.
You mentioned your mum, and she was a great inspiration musically as well in your life, wasn't she?
Yeah, so Mum used to play classical music to me during my childhood and before I was born, and Mum's journey, started in central Queensland around the Emerald and Springsure area. She's here in the audience today at the front. And, listening to Mario Lanz and the Great Caruso. And so Mum had always had this operatic style voice interacting with the landscape, and so I took a seed out of that, or was given or gifted the seed of that sort of improvisation with the land and being a real-time composer, in a Western sense where, you have to, you want to notate stuff just for the intellectual property value of it, but also so the legacy can be passed on in a modern day world, but also the songs, the most important thing is to actually sing the song and be a part of that song, whatever that lullaby looks like or sounds like for people from all walks of life.
Yeah, it's the joining, isn't it, of the music. And when you talked about your mum and her operatic voice and you playing the didgeridoo, you've sort of started at an early age joining it too, because she then later on has performed with you, hasn't she?
Yeah, so we've had quite a few collaborations over the years, and they're quite special moments. From being in Paris to Mum creating a special poem for the canonisation of Mary MacKillop, and we performed in the Vatican for that ceremony with the string quartet over there, which is really great. And still performing today, like even in COVID last year when we couldn't, I was in Sydney, so Mum couldn't physically be there, but I asked Mum to write poems for our live works on the various platforms that we performed on. And so that was really special to recite Mum's work with Veronique Saray, my co-collaborator as well. Yeah.
And talking about your uncle, it's quite significant, the didgeridoo that he handed to you. Tell us about the significance of that.
I guess the passing of the culture traditionally with, from what I found, the elders passed that culture on, but with the didgeridoo or yidaki, they buried it or burned it in the fire to silence the sound forever. So it's sort of rare that you'll find old traditional didgeridoos because, they're not a violin where you put some lacquer on it, not lacquer, but, and keep them in a sort of stored area. They're not meant for travelling, basically. So when you travel overseas in a plane and the constant temperature changes, But the significance of that was for me to pass on the story, to be a part of that story that was starting then for me, like the sinew, and the kangaroo sinew, like it's a linear journey where I'll pass that on through my DNA, through the voice on the stage. Yeah.
It's quite a big honour, isn't it?
Yeah.
A special honour. How did you feel when that happened?
Look, I knew it was a special moment in my childhood when my uncle passed away. That was very significant because I was like one of his last students in that sense. And but I wanted to continue on. I wagged school and I used to practice and play didgeridoo every day, and be a part of as much culture as I possibly could, and experience that out in the bush and still smell the smell of the beeswax and the native beeswax, and the bees hive when you cut down the branch of the tree, and that was exciting, as a kid. And then, this didgeridoo is really good. This one, what key is that in, And so then you start learning about the theory and all that. I still don't know what the circle of fifths are, but,
Do you remember, is there something in particular that you remember him telling you or teaching you?
That the didgeridoo is like a language, and that's sort of a common thread. The language of different tribes throughout Australia, having over 300 throughout the country, the dialect, so when you get into the didgeridoo, the yidaki, you can sort of distinguish, that player, he must come from that line of didgeridoo players, or that ancestral background, you know, of the dreaming stories. Because there's a few, you know, there's many out there actually, the Dreamtime stories, and they all sort of correlate, you know, to each other. And so there's a commonality between those stories, and I guess how I interpretate that in a modern day setting, especially writing for, you know, Western instruments. You know, some of my composition processes vary from just being on the piano or to listening to the bush. You know, like one of my sort of songs, one of my works that have come out, you know, in the last sort of several years, I wrote in 2006, but it's been played more frequently now, like Birdsong at Dusk. You know, I wrote that up in Mackay. You know, I'm a Mango Avenue, listening to some birds out on the water. You know, and so just finding the inspiration and translating that, kind of like what Sculthorpe did with his inspiration of the land, and, you know, those uniquely Australian, you know, bits in his orchestral work like Mangrove and Kakadu, where you really feel the travelling of the bird, you know, and the eagle being the third eye.
What's easier to play, the didgeridoo, the electric guitar, or the piano? You play them all.
Oh, I think I can play them all in my head great, but the didgeridoo is my first instrument musically, and so certainly didgeridoo, and then the guitar is the second best instrument, I guess, in terms of a Western instrument that I can sort of, you know, and it's fun to practice and have that feeling like when you're first learning an instrument, you know. So I have that sometimes where I'll practice for 8 hours a day or something on the guitar, just to revamp my skills, as any musician would. You know, I can work on autopilot because of, I guess, my level of playing and my training that I did as a youngster. And so, but it's always good to revamp, because you can always get better and better. Yeah. You know, just be creative and reverse the rhythms that you do, or just listen to other styles of music, you know, from jazz to, you know, hip hop to rock and roll. You know, having worked with, you know, people like Herbie Hancock on stage, and James Morrison and Yo-Yo Ma a few years ago, where he invited me to be a part of his like encore in Melbourne, and I could fit it in because I just come back from Hanover to Australia for a week and then back to Europe, sort of thing. And so, yeah, Yo-Yo Ma was cool because he, you know, he can improvise and that, and yeah. So I sang my Kalkadonga song, then walked out on stage. Yeah, it was cool.
Is there a music that you follow? You know how we write music for piano or guitar, and then someone can pick up that written music and play it. Is there a music that you write for your didgeridoo, or can someone follow it?
That's the plan, for someone to follow it. To get that technical ability and the advanced techniques that I do. But, you know, having said that, those advanced techniques are a combination of my musical experiences and the way that I play. So it's very textural and it's very high art, you know, I'd call it, and intricate and, you know, at times delicate. And so I look at it purely as a musical instrument, but I couldn't do that without the traditional foundations of, you know, what I learnt and heard as a young kid growing up around Mount Isa, and the power of it. And you don't have to play fast and furious to feel that power, or, you know, hear another didgeridoo player. So, you know, I felt the power from Tommy, you know. And so we all have our different playing styles, you know, and it's the more you play with other musicians, like when you have a full orchestra, it's a bit of a treat. You know, you can interact with all those textures and sounds. So you might find that my history timeline, most of my earlier works are string quartets, and that's because the strings are around me in an orchestra. So when I can hear the viola and the cello and the double bass, you know, and the first violin and second. And so then it expanded out. So as long as I could start writing the foundation of what I heard in my mind, and then as my ability got better and better, and, you know, I think I'm still wanting to get better. You know, I know what things I need to learn and how I need to practice them. And then that combined with, you know, a platform where you can actually premiere works makes the world a different place too.
And not just around the world with orchestras you've played, but also then played on stage at big events with, I suppose, people like, you know, Icehouse, and, you know, also for the Men at Work song, you know, Land Down Under. How does that help, you know, get a new audience?
When you work in those environments, you're a part of that engine room already. Like we spoke about, like I'm a part of the engine room of the symphony orchestra. You've got the magical Ben Northey conducting, and so you're part of a team. So it is like a team effort on the stage, and myself as a composer and the soloist, I'm projecting out in the audience. Even if I only connect with one person, I've done my thing like my uncle did. He connected with me, even if it's on a subconscious level. I feel I still carry his spirit on, as with my father from the land. Where my dad's buried out on country, outside of Mount Isa.
He was musical too, wasn't he?
Yeah, he played R&B, but R&B, old R&B, like rhythm and blues, not, hip-hop style. And so I remember going to the Mount Isa Folk Club and playing with Mum and Dad. And Dad do the song Johnny Little Kookaburra, and so he's a really good rhythm guitarist, And so that's where I picked up my guitar chops as well, and then expanded, listening to Tommy Emmanuel and Stevie Vai and all that sort of jazz. And
I mentioned earlier that at 17 you were invited to perform with the Queensland Symphony Orchestra. Now we've gone a full circle and you're back again this weekend. What does that mean to you to be back just over 20 years later?
It means a lot. It's very special. I remember that moment of performing, firstly with the orchestra when I was 17 at the ABC International Fair at UQ, the work by Philip Buchanan, Dan Scunda. And then in the early 2000s, after working at the Australian Festival of Chamber Music, hearing Sculthorpe's music firstly before I met him here at the concert hall, I think in 2001 after Martin Buzzcott gave me a call, I said, "Hey, Will, you want to come in and do this Earth Cry?" I'm like, "Yeah, okay, I'll be there." And I remember Sculthorpe walking in and in his checkered vest he used to wear, like, "Oh, I hear you're a good didgeridoo player. We'll see about that, yes." And so, that moment, and then the connection, and that night we did Earth Cry, performed Earth Cry when Michael Christie was conducting. And that was when magic was made, I think, and we all felt that. I remember that significant sort of standing ovation, and that night, we found a sponsor, Queensland Teachers Union Health Fund, to help pay for the extra players to go travel on the tour to Japan for the Tokyo Shinjuku City, Tokyo City Opera Concert Hall Festival. And so that was very significant. And, then you still got to go on your journey, to over all those speed bumps because I had my own vision and own agenda where I wanted to create more repertoire for the didgeridoo and the classical world. And the didgeridoo, is a newly introduced instrument into that classical world. But in Australia, I must say, the classical world is quite young. Whereas you go to Europe and they love crazy pieces, like the Lisa Lim's type, if you're familiar with Lisa Lim's work, very big and grand and very complex and complicated. They love that over there, Whereas here, our ears aren't so attuned to some far out sort of music and sound. So I guess I'm trying to find the bridge of have the emotions of the Australian landscape work within the context of the classical orchestra or the word classical music, on the stage with these, instruments that have all these articulations and emotions themselves.
We're going to talk more about that when we discuss the orchestra and what's happening this weekend, and I'm sure Craig has some things to tell us about that, how to sort of combine the orchestra and the didgeridoo, and hopefully we'll see that more. But before we start the panel discussion, William, just tell us a little bit about what we're going to see this weekend at QPAC.
Going to see, of course, a world premiere, but something that I feel is connected to the orchestra. So when I was writing this piece, I was writing for what I felt was my friends on the stage, and then little did I know that, Jill, our harpist, was, departing the orchestra, so this was one of her last concerts, and I already started writing for the harp because I really love the harp, and so it was really special to hear that she was, chose this, this concert to be one of her last, and like, oh, cool, I'll write a few more notes and hope that she can play them. So, that's in one of the lullaby sections. So it is about connection to country. There are busy moments in it, but they're just like musical passing, they're like little passages that I'm passing through, but then there's moments where I feel or I hope that people can connect with to my country and my expression, connect to Mum and Dad and my uncle Arthur Peterson and what the lullaby is, again, that lullaby, that notion of connection to our ancestors. Doesn't matter if you're black or white, we all have a song line. And sometimes in humanity, we we forget what that songline is for ourselves. So that's what I hope people can walk away with, and they remember some tune out of there, which is the lullaby at the end. So stick around for the end.
Yeah, stick around for the end. Don't walk like a movie. You've got to stay for the end. A round of applause for William with that insight. Thank you. I'd like to get the panel discussion started. We've got a lot to get through. Moving over to the Honourable Anthe Philippides. Anthe, without your vision and support to commission this world premiere piece, we wouldn't be sitting here today having this discussion, so we're very grateful. Can you share with us, though, your connection with William and your passion for this project?
Well, I have been a fan of William's over some period. He represents something extraordinarily powerful, I think, in the journey of Australian music, and my thinking was to be part of creating that new genre of Australian music, which is really so uniquely Australian. The Didgeridoo is an extraordinary instrument. I mean, in one level it's very simple, but it's amazingly complex, and it can produce extraordinarily layered, evocative sounds that take us on a journey that is really one of place. And there is a great sense of place in William's music. So I have been thinking, you know, what is Australian music? What are the arts to us? And I think this is a fantastic development in Australian music, that we see First Nations musicians and hear First Nation voices together with the Western style of music that we are much more accustomed to, and that marriage is actually a really exciting place. It's a very organic place, and it's got a fantastic future and will take us on a marvellous shared path.
How can we further develop that and combine the cultures with classical music?
Well, I think, you know, commissioning this work was my way of encouraging that. But at the end of the day, we need to make a place for First Nations musicians, composers, to be heard as part of mainstream music. And I'm really delighted that William, who is a maestro, is part of the Maestro series, and that it's positioned at the heart of the concert program of QSO. So I think all of those developments are very exciting, and there is an escalation of interest, and that really is a movement of, I suppose, non-Indigenous Australians moving towards and being curious and interested and respectful of another way of making music, of communicating, and ultimately of creating a language that we all understand.
And I'm going to bring Tony Denholder now into the conversation. And Tony, in keeping with music as this universal language, what are your thoughts on using the power of music to bring all Australians together?
Well, thanks, Loretta. And just thank you, Tommy, for such a wonderful and powerful welcome to country. It was amazing. I think in one space is education, where I think music is a crucial ingredient to helping children learn, particularly in Indigenous schools in remote and disadvantaged areas. Now, it is the most disadvantaged schools which often don't have a music program. And in Cape York, in our schools, we have a very vibrant music program, singing and kids learning instruments and theory. And over half the children in years 3 to 6 play an instrument. And we think that's a must-have, because in these remote schools, there's chronic absenteeism, low attendance rates. But over the last 5 years, we've seen that music encourages children to go to school, and also it helps them focus and discipline and improve their cognitive development. But really what's magical is we have a lot of singing in language, which fosters the cultural heritage and encourages the community to sort of promote their language. So I think music across all sectors of society, but particularly for young people, is critical.
We'd need that to be supported though, wouldn't we? Because we'd need the teachers, the staff to get there to bring that music to the children as well.
That's what makes it so hard, getting teachers to take roles in remote communities where they may be required to teach other subjects. There's other priorities for many schools, but I think that, I know the QSO's committed for many years to education programs, and organisations like the QSO can do more to support those endeavours.
Yeah, well, I'll bring Craig into the conversation now too. How is the QSO doing that, and we'll do that in the future?
Yeah, look, we're really just starting on that journey. And you mentioned before some of the programs that I've put in place in Western Australia, and I have to echo absolutely what Tony is saying. And Western Australian Symphony Orchestra has a program called Crescendo and another one called OK Me. Crescendo is based in Kwinana, which is an outer metropolitan suburb, low socioeconomic, high risk community, and unlike Queensland, Western Australia doesn't have compulsory music education at all. So, and exactly as Tony was saying, it's always the schools who, the more disadvantaged schools that don't have the music education, and these two particular schools in Kwinana had no music education program, and through the support of a range of donors and sponsors, we were able to, starting with pre-primary in the first year, and then every year building upon that. So by the time I left, every child from pre-primary to year 7 was receiving music education every single week. And the impact of that, as Tony was saying, it's not about necessarily building or creating the next William Barton or the next orchestral musician. It's fundamental in terms of their development, their educational improvement and educational development. And we absolutely saw that, and the response from the teachers, just having a quiet place where the kids would come in and, in the first instance, listen to the music and try to identify the individual instruments, taught them how to concentrate, how to focus their energy and their attention in that particular moment. Working and singing as part of a choir, suddenly they had to listen to each other, so their interpersonal skills improved because they had to listen and blend their voices to other students. And because they were having so much fun, they were coming to school much more often, so therefore they were getting the education. So all that element of improving focus, improving their concentration skills, improving their interpersonal skills, and the fact that they were coming to school more often led to a significant improvement in the education outcomes. The first lot of kids who went through the NAPLAN results, this was a school that genuinely fell well below the state average. It significantly raised, and it was the best result that those schools had achieved in their history, and were very well placed across the state. And the principals and the teachers identified that it was because of this music education program that improvement happened. So that's the kind of the basis where I come is, how do we help? How does the QSO, as a leading music organisation, how do we support not only the next generation of orchestral musicians, but how can we play a key role in the good to great schools? How can we support those extraordinary initiatives that are already in place, using the power of music to enhance educational outcomes, enhance social outcomes, and to be, at a very base level, accessible and relevant to the broader community of Queensland. Our mission is to be an orchestra for all Queenslanders, and the very important part of Queensland is our First Nations community, and we need to be engaged in a meaningful and long-term way which leaves a legacy of improvement, not only musically, socially and educationally, and that's a real focus for us from the board down going forward. And the exciting part about this week is, and I got to hear William's piece played through for the very first time yesterday, and all the things that you were talking about before that are absolutely invoked in this music. That sense of place, that sense of community, that sense of language, you know, there is a real place for us, I believe, in terms of the development, the evolution of classical music. No, it's not about incorporating necessarily Didgeridoo and Beethoven, Brahms and Mahler, but it is about what are the new stories that we create, what are the new stories that we commission that tell a very unique story about Queensland. And I think what you will hear on later today, but also over the weekend, is absolutely a unique Queensland story through music in a classical music form.
Great. We had a parent just 2 weeks ago say that the main reason her son still goes to school, this is primary, is because of the music. So you hear these stories time and time again. I see Erica Hart is in the audience, and Erica's done a fabulous job over the years with Indigenous school cohorts, particularly for the band on Cape York and bringing the brass band in Yarrabah. And it's one of the brilliant things in Queensland to visit Yarrabah each year for their concert, where there's literally thousands of people there, hundreds of Indigenous kids running around celebrating music.
It is a challenge, isn't it? Those programs are fantastic. It's a challenge to keep them going and for people to support them. Anthe, how do you see that going in the future?
I think it's very important that, of course, that there is an educational aspect to all of this, but I suppose my own personal focus is on promoting and sustaining First Nation artists, and that we need to hear them, and that we need to have more diversity in what we see and hear, and that until, you know, recently, there just wasn't that presence on the stage, and we need to be welcoming and inclusive, and that the combination is a really exciting place. It's a new form of music. It is a essentially Australian language and dialogue of music. So for me, that's really important, and that we have that element at the heart of all our creative expressions, whatever form they take, so that it's part of who we are.
William, in your travels, especially overseas in particular, would you say that your music, the music of the didgeridoo, when you perform, is more appreciated overseas by overseas audiences than we should appreciate at home?
Well, there is a huge appreciation for it overseas, because as when you're a tourist, you know, like to another land, or you bring something to another land, you know, it's curiosity, but it's how you convey that curiosity. So how I interpret the didgeridoo as a high-level art form rather than a tokenistic instrument with an orchestra, there's a big difference of just adding, you know, the instrument to whatever sort of music. So I go to other countries with a meaning, and meet with meaning and purpose, you know. And I think of, you know, when I was at, you know, Carnegie Hall as part of the G'day USA tour one year with the Adelaide Symphony, you know, Living Newton-John and all the crew, Jimmy Barnes and that. I'm backstage in the green room, you know, and the Beatles have been there and everything, and so I think those moments, like, okay, I'm playing one of the, you know, sort of most famous concert halls in the world, venues, and, you know, I'm there with the Adelaide Symphony Orchestra, but I'm playing my work called Kalkadungu, you know, I co-wrote with Matthew Heinton, and so I go out on the stage with meaning and purpose, and I think of my mum and dad, and think of the land, like in all seriousness, that's what I do. And I have my little moment of acknowledgement, whether that's a prayer or however you want to conceive that. And so that's very important for me. So when I go out there, you know, people can see if you're, you know, having a joke on stage, which is fine, or in moments where the music is serious and there's a strong connection, that's the bit where I'm focused, like really focused on my projection of how I want the audience to conceive it, rather than, oh yeah, that's what you do, like, oh wow, that's a bit interesting, or that gave me a feeling. So it's about the feeling and how we negotiate that, you know, on paper, but also this presence. The presence is important.
Yeah, that emotion that it invokes.
Just a question. When you create new works, cultural heritage for First Nations goes back thousands of years. When you create new works, do you see it as sort of like an evolution and adding to both First Nations cultural heritage as well as the broader cultural heritage of this country?
Yeah, no, it's a great question. I do. It's part of a bigger legacy that's already there. You know, it's kind of like when you sing to a dry riverbed, it's going to be flowing still. Underneath it is, and the more you sing to it, the more it'll flow, you know.
Can I also add that when you listen to William's music, it's mesmerising and terribly exciting because you're hearing new things that you've never heard before, sounds that are incredibly evocative of being in Australia, and different elemental aspects, you know, wind, strong wind, mild wind, you know, wind through grass, wind through trees, all those really fine nuances that are so strongly conveyed in a way that's startlingly new for us, and that makes us hear in a different way. And I think hearing in a different way, you know, music that does that is incredibly profound and powerful.
And the technique to be able to do that as well is fascinating. And William, I'd like you to explain the circular breathing method to people in case they don't know, because it's a tough thing. He's got a Guinness Book of World Record for holding his breath or something, haven't you?
Yeah. So the circular breathing, I think there's a really old article, I think from the UQ International Fair in 1998, whenever that was, and I mentioned it then because someone brought it up recently, and it's about, I said the circular breathing is certainly part of the technical aspects of the didgeridoo, but it's one of the small things as well. It all interconnects, you know, but the main thing was to learn about the culture of it, or the feeling and the presence of it, and pay respects to the instrument in an appropriate way, and carry on that heritage, you know, from my ancestors. And so I feel that, yes, I am creating. I'm a human being, and actually I write or I play on a physical instrument or sing, but that's again from the land, you know. So again, going back to that thing of singing to the river, you know, we're just a part of the sound. So when we're, you know, gone from this earth, we're just a part of it again. And you know, someone might think, oh yeah, this is a new idea, but it's actually not really, you know. But you know, it's just the way, like Anthe said, like it's how we express the wind, or you know, you can tell it in a jokingly way, or you can you know, present it in a very serious way. But both ways can be musical, you know. But yeah.
Are you always creating though? So, for example, yes, you might be sitting somewhere, you've got the wind, you hear those things, and music comes to your mind. Is there always something new that you see and then interpret yourself?
Yeah, always something new. In walking along the river, you know, the last few days I've been here, I've been preparing for my concert, you know, doing my sort of 15 to 20,000 steps a day, and in the morning, you know, today I've done like 13,000 steps. So I got up at 5 o'clock, listened to the orchestral recording from last night, and like, that's what I got to talk to Ben about, that bit where I want to, you know, repeat a little section at the end and that sort of thing. And so, you know, just in the morning, you know, where it's nice and quiet, you know, you'll be coming to life with the light, and it's a special time to do work, you know, in your mind and prepare for things.
Craig was talking before, and we all were, about education, and obviously you have seen young people who look at you and look what you're doing and want to be like you. Have you seen some young people out and about in your travels who, you know, are struggling, but music has changed their life?
Yeah, yes, I remember like a concert here as part of the educational series like many years ago. I was probably playing a Sculthorpe work, but a lady came up to me and said, oh, you know, like, thanks, I just want to say thanks because my son was a bit of a lout, and but, you know, he's picked up the instrument now, a classical instrument, and he's, you know, on the straight and narrow. So those sort of inspiring moments are great, you know, because, again, it's like if you've connected to one person, you know, that can hopefully spread, you know.
Yeah. What about the tradition of music? Are we succeeding in, you know, I suppose, holding on to that tradition?
Sadly not. There's a UN-related body a few years ago called the International Council of Traditional Music, which says we've already lost up to 98% of Australia's traditional music, which is really sad. And they think that in the next generation or two, a lot more will be lost. So I think there's a clarion call for all of us to do what we can to preserve traditional music. There's a group, a language centre at Jabiru and Kakadu, which has an archive of all the recordings of the rich songbook of Kakadu. And I was listening to one of the songs just yesterday, thinking about today. And it's just amazing to hear these words being sung, which have been passed on through possibly hundreds of generations. But then you have communities where song is being lost. There's a celebratory music singing style called Ganhill near Hopevale, and it's never been recorded. So I think there's things which, you know, we can do to try preserving and then hopefully promote traditional music.
What do you think about that, Anthe? How do we do that?
Look, I think it's absolutely essential. We cannot lose this rich cultural resource that has been a part of, you know, these lands for so long. It's absolutely imperative that we preserve that we revive the language, that we do everything in our power not to lose it, and then also to just respect it, to respect its age, its power, its, you know, I think if I could say, healing possibilities, you know. And when we talk about new Australian music being new, what's new is the combination of ancient and modern to create something new. It's not new contemporary music that we're talking about. We're really talking about the coming together in a respectful and meaningful way, and revering that coming together as something very unique and very worth preserving.
And we will be doing that this weekend with William's concert, Epic Sounds, and his pieces. But Craig, will we be seeing that in the future? I mean, it's this weekend, but we want to see it more.
Yeah.
You know, what plans are there to include the didgeridoo regularly with the orchestra?
Look, I think it's. I'm a big believer in that you have to see it to be it, and what we have with the First Nations community is an extraordinary role model in William, and it is about how do we continue to tell the stories of Queensland and the really unique stories of Queensland are, of course, our First Nation stories. So how do we get those onto the stage? And I think it really is about us listening, and it's about us working with, and I'm fair to say we're in the very early stages, but it's about talking to the community and working through as to how can we work together to develop the work, to tell the stories, to put them onto the stage. And indeed, it may well be that it is about how do we partner with the communities, which is what West Australian Symphony Orchestra is doing in Karajini, is a partnership kind of that started purely by accident between our principal cello and one of the elders there, and him talking about his concern about the loss of the song lines, and them agreeing that the principal cello would start to adapt those song lines for the cello, which then grew into creating it for a string quartet and performing those song lines in the gorges of Carragini, and with the view going forward that that will become an orchestral performance. So it may well be exactly as Anthe is saying, about not necessarily creating something completely new, but it's about, you know, respecting those song lines, respecting the old, and bringing the new into it to create something that is uniquely Queensland, but also a new way of telling the old stories. But again, that needs to be something that we work with the communities and get an understanding of whether that is something that is appropriate for them, and doing it in partnership and in a respectful and a committed way over a longer period.
And it does get back to education, doesn't it? It does get back to giving kids at school the view that this opportunity is there and the understanding. Like, you know, and William, do you deal with children at schools? Do you see anyone coming through who, you know, would follow in your footsteps?
Yeah, there's an amazing, you know, lineup of talent out there in regional and remote communities, and there's, you know, and even the classical music aside, there's another uniquely sort of Australian genre of music where I've heard, you know, from my young teenage days, before I was a teenager, going to Woodford Folk Festival, and there's a group called the Pad Boys, you know, and they're from up Cairns way, and they had this unique reggae crossover country and western rock and roll feel, and I've never heard that before. Like, you know, that was way back then, and yes, you could make that commercial, but meaning make it more public. They just need the platform, and it's really amazing. You know, it's really amazing to hear that sort of talent out there. But didgeridoo players and songmen, songwomen, you know, they're there. You know, we just allow that space for them to come and work and be cherished, you know, with their talent. And it is a two-way street, though. You know, we don't want to hand out the platform, but there is talent there where they're ready for that platform. Yeah. So we've got to narrow it down and find those people who are really talented, the youngsters and even the older people as well. Because
it's sacred, isn't it? It's a fine line, isn't it?
Yeah.
Because it is a sacred tradition, it is a sacred music. So how do you marry that and keep it sacred?
You marry it through conversation and actually just doing. And yes, we can talk all we want, you know, but the actual way of the process is actually for me to get up and right now, like, play the didgeridoo.
Would you like to?
Yes. When you're ready.
Would you like to? Would you like me to? Well, we've got it. Look, we've got 5 minutes left, so let's quickly thank Tony, Anthe, Craig, but we'll quickly get William to play something for us then before we finish the live stream, if that's okay, yeah?
Yeah.
All right. Let's clap him again.
I'll stand up for this and then I'll sit back down, maybe. I'll sing a song first, a very short one. So the song I wrote when I was about 15 years old, growing up in Mount Isa, and it's about the passing of the culture from one generation to the next. And for those of you who know my music, I've sang this in my orchestral work, Kalkadungu, to various other improvisation works with jazz musicians and so on. There's Kalkadungu Yudal, Kalkadungu Marabai, the passing of the culture from one generation to the next. Kalkaranga yoro, oh kalkaranga marabai, yanta montana bila bila, montana liwama hey. Kalkaranga yoro, oh kalkaranga marabai, yanta montana bila bila, montana liwama hey. Bella bella anta, bella bella milthi, bella bella wama, wishin walinga. Ganta montana bella bella, montana li wama he. Marabai, 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 marabai li wama, marabai, marabai, marabai li walinga. Yanta Motana Bella Bella Motanali Wama.
Thank you very much. Did you want to explain anything a bit more about that piece?
It was improvised, but yeah, I just wanted to connect with you, and even if you don't know what the words are of the emotion, you might take it away with you, and you might remember that moment. Yes.
We've got 5 more minutes. I just want to get a final comment from each of the panel members. Firstly, Tony, just how important conversations like today are, and where can we go from here?
I think we've turned the corner. I think, look at the wonderful audience here today, people watching us on stream. Australians generally are now wanting, in earnest, to promote, preserve Indigenous culture, the role of Aboriginal Australians in everyday life, and particularly music. So I think each of us has a role to play, be it big or small, and there's just great things we can do.
Anthe?
William mentioned about being a bridge, and I think musicians are a bridge between, in relation to who we are, what matters to us, and connecting with First Nations peoples does matter to us. I think it's very clear that it does. So increasing that connection is very important going forward.
A bridge is a great way to describe it, isn't it? Craig?
Yeah, look, I would agree with both of those comments and simply say that QSO is on that journey. We see that we have a role to play and are committed to playing that role going forward.
And William, the future for you after QSO, what should we be looking out for?
For myself personally, just the journey ahead, to be still continuing the legacy and working with organisations like Queensland Symphony, and still telling Mum's story. Have we got a moment for Mum to sing?
Yes, we have got a
to
moment
file
for Mum.
up. So come on, Mum.
Come on, Mum.
Come on.
Where's
Yeah.
Delmo? You might have to go down to...
Haven't got time for a wardrobe change, right? Yeah. Come on now.
This is such a treat for us to watch Delmo sing with
It's all right,
William.
Mum.
I'll take that off.
You take
There
that
we
off. It's a bit
go.
hot in here today.
Thank you, Mum.
A great
Look,
collaboration.
2 minutes.
Oh, I've got to take my shoes.
Oh, yes, that's true. Okay, there we go.
That's why I still feel the earth.
William and Delmo Barton. Fabulous.
You right there?
Thank you so much, Delmay. Thank you, Delmay. Thank you, William Barton. And thank you to our panel. That ends our Epic Sounds conversation today. Thank you so much for coming. Really appreciated you being here. To those of you on the live stream, you'll be rejoining us in about a half an hour's time for the rehearsal. To those of you here live, again, thank you so much for coming. It's been a pleasure to moderate today and have this conversation. And please make sure you support William and the wonderful Epic Sounds concert happening at QPAC with the QSO this weekend. Thank you so much. Thank you to Tony, Anthe, William and Grant. Thank you so much. Thank you. Thank you.